There's a specific kind of silence that falls over a tennis court when a dream starts to die in front of 40 million people, and Alex Eala walked straight into it on center court. Her hands were shaking on a serve that used to be her shield. A whole nation was watching from living rooms and arenas back home, praying, and something invisible was already going wrong. What broke her was not Paolini. It was closer than that. And the real reason she didn't win has far less to do with the final score than most people think. The night the nation held its breath. Let me take you back to Monday evening, the 6th of July, because that is where this whole story cracks open. Alex Eala walked onto center court not as some hopeful underdog anymore, but as the woman who had just torn down the defending champion 2 days earlier. The pressure sitting on her shoulders was unlike anything a Filipino athlete had carried into a tennis arena before. You could feel it in the way the crowd leaned forward every time she bounced the ball. By the time she lost that fourth-round match to Jasmine Paolini, 4 games to 6, 6 games to 4, and 3 games to 6, something strange had already happened around the world. More than 1.2 million people had watched the highlights of her Świątek win on the Wimbledon YouTube channel, which was more than twice the audience that tuned in for matches involving Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams. Think about what that means for a second. A 21-year-old from Quezon City had pulled a bigger crowd than 2 of the most famous athletes in the history of the sport. Back in the Philippines, the government had opened up the PhilSport Arena in Pasig City for a free watch-along that could hold up to 8,000 fans. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. had already called her a true inspiration and said tennis does not operate at a higher level than Wimbledon, so she is really world-class. And when it was finally over, when the last ball had dropped and the scoreline was sealed, Eala did not storm off in tears. She shaped her hands into a heart, held them up to the center court that rose to its feet for her, and told her millions of followers to never say die and play every point like your life depends on it. That standing ovation felt like a coronation dressed up as a goodbye. But here is the thing that nobody clapping in that stadium wanted to admit to themselves. The very weapon that was supposed to carry her into the quarterfinals had abandoned her from the opening game, and it was a one-parter game everyone in the sport had been quietly worried about for over a year. The weapon that turned on her. Now we get to the real reason, and it is not a comfortable one. Eala did not lose that match because Paolini was some unstoppable force of nature. She lost it because of her serve. And if you know anything about the way she plays, you already felt this coming before the first set was done. Her first serve on that day was floating across the net at a leisurely 80 miles per hour or slower, and it was only landing in about half the time. The official numbers put her first serve percentage at just 55.7, which means nearly every second point she was starting from behind before the rally even began. At one point, one of her serves registered a pathetic 65 miles per hour, which is the kind of speed a club player would hit on a lazy Sunday. The lowest moment came at 4-1 down in the opening set, when she pushed a first serve that barely tickled the bottom of the net, and then followed it up by clanking her second serve long. Here is where it gets brutal. She won only 48.7% of her second serve points, and Paolini feasted on it. Every soft delivery was an invitation, and the Italian accepted every single one of them by stepping in and taking the ball early. When you cannot trust your own serve, you stop playing tennis, and you start apologizing for it. You defend when you should attack. You flinch when you should swing. And this was never a secret. The analyst Gil Gross had already said out loud that Eala has the worst serve in the top 50, yet somehow she was sustaining herself in the top 40 on pure talent everywhere else. The BBC commentator and Kia Thaving pointed out during the tournament that Eala's average second serve speed of 74 miles per hour sits miserably below the tour average of 86 and the top 10 average of 92. So this weakness was not some shocking twist. It was a crack in the foundation that everyone could see, waiting for the wrong day to give way. What makes this so painful is that the exact same slow serve had been a genuine weapon just 48 hours earlier against Iga Świątek. So the question that should be haunting you right now is simple. If the technique did not change overnight, then what on earth happened to her between Saturday and Monday? The ghost of Saturday's victory. The answer lives in the 2 days that came before, and it is more human than any statistic. Beating Świątek was not just a win for Eala. It was an earthquake. It was the biggest emotional moment of her entire career, detonating on the sport's grandest stage. And you do not simply switch that off and go back to normal like nothing happened. Eala admitted herself afterwards with a kind of quiet honesty that told you everything. She said she did have to manage the emotions, and that it was part of professionalism, and that this was not the first time she had scored a huge win, and then had to play again 2 days later. Read between those careful words, and you can hear a young woman who spent 48 hours trying to come down from the highest peak of her life, while the whole world screamed her name. The proof is buried in the service numbers, and this comparison is the part that should stop you cold. Against Świątek, she was averaging 86.3 miles per hour on her first serve. She cracked 4 aces, she committed 0 double faults, and she won 55% of her second serve points. Świątek herself confessed after that defeat that it was tougher mentally for her to accept the missed returns coming off those slow serves. So the serve was working. It was doing its job beautifully. Then Monday arrived, and that same delivery became a liability she could not hide. 3 double faults instead of none. Under 50% of second serve points instead of 55. A Spanish outlet puntoed break, put plainly by observing that the sky-high expectations after the Świątek when weighed too heavily on her, and that she simply was not as fresh or as dominant as she had been 2 days before. She even had preventive tape wrapped around her left forearm, which she brushed off by saying it was more preventive than anything because it had been a long season. So the body was tired, and the mind was still floating somewhere back on Saturday. And yet, drained and flat as she was, Eala still managed to claw her way to winning the second set and dragging this thing into a decider. That alone tells you she had the game to win. What she did not fully understand yet was that the woman standing on the other side of the net had built an entire career out of waiting patiently for exactly this moment. The woman who knew how to wait. You cannot tell the real story of this loss without giving Jasmine Paolini her due, because experience is the quietest killer in all of sport. Paolini is 30 years old, and she has lived with a fire that Eala is only just walking into. She is a former world number 4, the joint highest-ranked Italian woman in history, and she reached the finals of both the French Open and Wimbledon in the same year not long ago. She knows what the second week of a Grand Slam feels like in a way Eala simply cannot yet. And the beautiful irony is that Paolini arrived at this tournament looking like anything but a threat. Her season had been a mess. She was carrying a foot injury that had wrecked her grass court preparation, and she had lost her very first set of the entire fortnight by 6 games to love. Most players would have crumbled under that start. Instead, she looked at it and thought, well, it can only get better from here, and she built herself back up point by point and game by game like a veteran who has learned not to panic. That composure is what decided the tight moments. When the pressure was at its absolute worst in the deciding set, Paolini won 94% of her first serve points. She dropped just 5 points on serve across the whole set, and she did not face a single break point when it mattered most. She took 27 trips to the net and converted 18 of them, which is a mark of a player who trusts her instincts under fire. She even said she felt inspired by seeing Roger Federer sitting in the royal box, calling him her idol and admitting she was trying hard not to think about him watching. This was the same Paolini that Eala had actually beaten earlier in the year in Dubai, by 6 games to 1 and 7 games to 6. So this was not about talent superiority. This was about a woman who had been in the deep end before and knew exactly how to hold her breath, while the younger stars started to drown in the occasion. And drowning is precisely what began to happen, because there's a single game in that deciding set where all of Eala's inexperience came pouring out at the worst possible time, and it is the moment this entire match quietly turned forever. The 2 points that changed everything. If you want to find the exact heartbeat where the dream slipped away, you have to look at the razor-thin margins, because this match was so much closer than the final score makes it seem. Midway through, the points were sitting almost dead level at 69 to Paolini and 68 to Eala. That is 1 single point of difference between the 2 of them. This was not a beating. This was a coin flip that kept landing on the wrong side for the Filipina. Rewind to the flow of it, and you can feel how fragile everything was. Paolini broke early in the first set and raced to 4-1, but Eala refused to fold and dragged it back to 4-5 before the Italian broke her one more time to steal the opener. In the second set, Eala came out swinging, wasted 3 break chances, then found her range. The most electric moment of her whole match came when she faced 0-40 on her own serve, 3 break points staring her down, and she reeled off 5 straight points to hold for 5-3 and level the contest. The crowd was roaring her name. Then came the decider, and the moment that will keep her up at night. With the set locked at 3 games apiece, Eala was serving, and she climbed to 40-30. She was 2 points away from holding for a 4-4 and keeping her nose in front. And that is where the wheels came off. She sent a backhand long to bring it to deuce. She dragged a forehand wide to hand Paolini the advantage. Then she coughed up a double fault at the cruelest possible time and followed it with one more backhand sailing long for unforced errors when she needed 4 clean points. And just like that, Paolini broke through for 5-3 and served a match out. Across the entire afternoon, Eala converted only 3 of her 10 breakpoint chances. And in a match decided by a single point of separation, those wasted opportunities are the difference between a quarterfinal and a plane ticket home. She said herself in the press room afterward that at this level it comes down to details, and that they are very fine details. But here is what she may not have fully realized as she said those words. High up in the commentary booth, one of the greatest players who ever lived had already spotted the tactical flaw that was silently bleeding her dry, and it had nothing to do with nerves. What the legends saw that you didn't. This is the angle almost nobody talked about, and is the one that turns this from a sad story into a fixable one. While the rest of the world was watching Eala's emotions, the 9-time Wimbledon champion Martina Navratilova was watching her serve placement, and she was frankly baffled by what she was seeing from the BBC booth. A graphic flashed up during the second set showing that Eala, a natural left-hander, was barely using the one advantage lefties are gifted at birth. Navratilova said it plainly. She said for a lefty, this is crazy. She pointed out that Eala was serving far too often out wide in the deuce court and down the middle in the ad court, which is the opposite of what a smart left-hander should be doing. Only a third of her serves were slicing away to the backhand, and Navratilova could not understand it. She said Eala has that wicked lefty serve, but she simply does not use it, and that the location was baffling her more than anything else on the court. Now here is where it gets interesting, because the former British number 1 Laura Robson pushed back and gave the counter-argument. Robson said that without more pace behind it, a wide serve on the ad court would just sit up in the slot and beg to be crushed by Paolini's backhand. So you only go out wide if you are willing to accelerate through it. That little disagreement between 2 experts tells you this was a genuine tactical puzzle, not a lazy mistake. And then the former world number 1 Caroline Wozniacki added the emotional layer that ties the whole thing together. She put the decisive collapse down to Eala's rawness, the ordinary growing pains of a young player still learning how to hold her nerve in the biggest moments, while making it clear she believes the best is still ahead. Even the reports out of the Philippines noticed that Eala kept leaking untimely errors off her backhand wing as the weight of the occasion climbed higher and higher. So put it all together. A serve everyone knew was fragile, a lefty weapon she was not aiming correctly, a mind still buzzing from Saturday, and a decider she gave away with her own errors. That is the real reason, and none of it is permanent, which is exactly why this defeat might end up being the best thing that ever happened to her. Why losing might be her greatest win. Strip away the disappointment and look at what she actually walked away with. Because the aftermath tells a completely different story than the scoreline. Eala did not just have a nice run. She banked £300,000 in prize money, which is roughly $396,000 US, and she collected 240 ranking points that pushed her total to a projected career high of world number 28. Every single loss should hurt this good. She became the first Filipino player in the Open era to reach the second week of a Grand Slam, stepping past the amateur era third-round finishes of the old Philippine greats who came before her. And the way she handled the defeat in front of the cameras was almost more impressive than the tennis itself. There was no bitterness and no excuse-making. She talked about controlling what she can control, about approaching those brutal moments with bravery and a steady mind and intensity, so that she can look back and feel no regret. The most telling part is where her head went next. She talked about the U.S. Open with genuine belief, saying this week will only add to her confidence, and that she walks into every match with the self-esteem and the thought that she is able to win. That is not the voice of a girl who got exposed. That is a voice of someone who just discovered the exact size of the gap between her and the very top, and realized it is smaller than she feared. President Marcos captured it perfectly when he posted that this remarkable Wimbledon run may have ended, but after what she accomplished, the world has only begun to see what Filipinos are capable of. The serve can be rebuilt. The lefty placement can be corrected. The nerves in a deciding set fade every single time you survive one. The talent to dismantle the defending champion is already there, permanent and undeniable. And the only thing standing between Alex Eala and a Grand Slam trophy is a weakness she already knows how to repair. So the real reason she did not win Wimbledon this year is not a tragedy at all. It is a to-do list, and she has years to check off every single box on it.